Hey everyone, I'm John with Roadkill Incorporated. So, yeah, I was once a very successful Apple seller on Amazon. I sold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of refurbished MacBooks every year, and then one morning I woke up to an Amazon email telling me I'd be kicked off in a few weeks. And all the other Apple Marketplace sellers got this email too. A few weeks later, it happened, just as planned. Thousands of small Apple selling businesses were dumped from the biggest online selling platform in the world, all because Apple and Amazon made a deal. This was almost 5 years ago, but no one has been let back on, and there has been virtually no consequence for either company. In fact, both companies have gotten much bigger, and the related problems have only gotten far worse. But let's go way back to the beginning. I started my Apple refurbishing business in 2008. I had been in the corporate world for 14 years previously, and I was miserable. And when I found repair and refurbishing, it was a new lease on life. The independence of being a small business owner for me was the only way to go, and I've promoted the benefits of small business by acting as a mentor to hundreds of others getting into refurbishing. I bought tens of thousands of Apple devices from recyclers every year, devices that might have been scrapped otherwise. I repaired them and sold them. I sold them individually to consumers for a while, but I discovered the benefits of selling bulk. You make less per device, but you can sell far more, so the vast majority of my sales were wholesale. At some point, one of my customers asked me to ship boxes of 10 laptops to something called Amazon Fulfillment instead of directly to him, as I had been doing. That struck me as odd. I mean, the customer is making money off me and he's not even having to see the computers? Well, I realized I should be doing that myself, so I bypassed him entirely and started selling on Amazon. It was really addictive and I made great money. On Amazon, you're not burdened with creating listings like you do on eBay, but instead you tag on to existing listings, so it only took minutes to list all my MacBooks. Every morning I woke up to a pile of orders that was 40% more profitable than I got selling wholesale, and in a few months, nearly half my business was routed through Amazon. So things were good for years, but in November 2018, I got that email. Dear seller, Amazon is constantly working to enhance the customer experience, and one of the ways we do this is by increasing selection of the products we know customers want. As part of a new agreement with Apple, we are working with a select group of authorized resellers to offer an expanded selection of Apple and Beats products, including new releases in Amazon stores. You're receiving this message because you are currently selling or have previously sold Apple or Beats products. Your existing offers for these products will soon be removed from Amazon's online store in the United States. Please contact Apple if you would like to apply to become an authorized reseller on Amazon. Thank you for selling on Amazon. Amazon Services. So, yeah, I was kind of stunned. Amazon can just do that? They can just dump their sellers because they made a deal? Once it all sunk in, I realized that this was news. So I contacted Jason Kebler, the reporter who has dedicated years of his career to repair coverage, and within hours an article was published in Vice. The whirlwind of activity that ensued confirmed that, yes, it was definitely news. I was the subject of a dozen articles over the next couple weeks, from the LA Times to NPR to PC Magazine to Louis Rossman's YouTube channel to Nikkei in Japan and many, many others. At some point in this time period, Amazon announced a new program for Apple sellers, but before I could get excited about it, I saw that a requirement for this Amazon Renewed, as they call it, was to show receipts for $2.5 million of Apple inventory purchased from approved suppliers in the previous quarter. That's $10 million per year. That's not 10 million sales. That's $10 million inventory bought from someone they approve of. That's not small business. That's big business. No small refurbishing or repair business could possibly touch that. Basically, zero of the businesses kicked off would be able to qualify. So there was no hope in that. Soon-to-be-removed sellers started discussions on Amazon forums, but most were deleted by the moderators. A dedicated Facebook group arose, and a small coalition of affected sellers was built. Many had gone all in with Amazon, and why wouldn't they? They got the best prices, and products sold very quickly on the biggest marketplace in the world. And now many faced bankruptcy for that decision. Many small business owners realized they would be going back to being employees, working for others. I published a letter to Jeff Bezos reminding him what it was like to sell books out of his garage. That generated publicity and caused an Amazon employee named Reginald to contact me and tell me that Jeff had read my letter. "We're taking your feedback about our restriction of Apple products under consideration," he wrote. It was certainly just a PR stunt to make me feel special and hopefully go away. I've emailed Reginald since, but he's never responded. Well, on the morning of January 4th, that dreaded day, our listings literally disappeared one at a time as we clicked refresh, and by that night, it was done. The only Apple listings left were renewed listings, renewed sellers got a life preserver thrown to them, and everyone else drowned. It ended with a whimper, not a bang. Unlike consumer-facing businesses, refurbishers rarely advertise themselves, so the general public barely noticed. I'm lucky I still had my wholesale customers, so I went back to wholesale and only suffered 6 or 8 bad months, but many of my friends went out of business. I tried other marketplaces just to see what was going on, but sales were scarce and the glut of ex-Amazon sellers drove prices down. Amazon is literally almost half the marketplace of all things sold online, so it was impossible to escape the shockwaves. Over time, the flurry of media coverage died down to almost nothing, and it really seemed like the situation had come to a conclusion. But then out of nowhere, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, contacted me. They'd read a Verge article I was in. Turns out the FTC Tech Task Force had been formed and was looking for new initiatives, and it was investigating the Amazon Apple deal. I did a formal phone interview with 7 lawyers and an economist who were trying to establish that damage had occurred. I dealt with the FTC frequently for a while, but soon they dropped out of sight. I wanted to talk about working with them, but I decided to give it time. But then a public FTC repair event took place, and there wasn't mention of the Amazon deal at all, which made me restless. What if instead of going public, the investigation fizzled out? I couldn't allow them to get away with that. So I told reporters, and the topic once again blew up. This time it was Wall Street Journal, The Verge, Bloomberg, and several others. A lot of people were learning about the deal for the first time. I routed a bunch of sellers to the FTC, which they had asked me to do. However, most sellers were unwilling to go public. It was really frustrating. Reporters wanted small businesses to interview, but I only had a short list that would even talk. It's amazing to witness that people won't speak up, even to save themselves. That seems to be a human constant, unfortunately. People can't conceive that things will ever change for the better, yet they almost always believe speaking out will have very real negative consequences. The FTC chairman stated that they had been hearing from Amazon sellers, so I definitely felt vindicated for breaking the story. Amazingly, he said he was willing to break up big tech if necessary, which was obviously great to hear. A week later, the House Judiciary Committee announced an antitrust probe into Apple, Amazon, and others. The companies were sent public letters requesting information on many topics, and look at this, here's one of them. All communications to or from the relevant executives relating to the following: Apple's decision in 2018 to enter into agreement with Amazon to sell Apple products on Amazon and to limit the resellers that can sell Apple products on Amazon. I was super excited at the prospect of the Amazon data being made public. It really wasn't known whether there were 1,000 banned sellers or 100,000. Maybe we'd learn the exact terms of the deal. A decision on how to proceed with the collected information was supposed to be made by early 2020. The suspense was high, the momentum was there, the general public was all worked up about antitrust, but nothing of substance ever actually happened. It's been 5 years and I'm still waiting. The other Amazon sellers are still waiting. With the Biden administration, the FTC was cleared out and reshuffled like a deck of cards. It seems to have forgotten the ambitious goals it had of breaking up big tech, and unfortunately the FTC of today seems more concerned with self-promotion and taking on small, insignificant challenges. I've talked to White House press correspondents for major media news outlets, and they've told me not to expect progress on antitrust because Biden's tech advisors are all former big tech people. And unfortunately, in the last several years, most people have completely forgotten about the Amazon deal, and all the momentum has been lost. It's yesterday's news. That's why I'm making this video. It's actually an update to a similar video I made 5 years ago. It's time to put a reminder out there. There are still many questions, Like I said, we don't know exactly what the deal was or why it happened. We just weren't in the room. But that didn't stop people from having opinions. Some assumed it happened because Apple sellers sold products in bad condition, but I don't think so. Here are some typical Amazon Renewed sellers selling today. Many have mediocre feedback ratings and negative comments, indicating that quality issues are the same as ever. Frankly, my feedback rating was 100%, so if they were after quality, they would have kept me and my friends. In fact, over the years, I've seen Apple authorized Amazon accounts for sale for up to $1 million. I've also been approached by Amazon Renewed sellers offering to let me use their accounts for a fee. So if someone can sell or lease their account to anyone, what does that say about quality? Some people assumed the deal happened because of quote unquote counterfeit products. Remember that whole counterfeit concern about Amazon a while back? But the bulk of the counterfeit problem has to do with batteries and chargers sold individually, and there are still thousands of listings for non OEM parts that could very easily be counterfeit or low quality. It's just not an issue with laptops themselves. So it's not quality and it's not counterfeiting. What was it then? I firmly believe Amazon was simply playing Monopoly, trading up from houses to hotels. It's easy to blame ourselves and wonder what we could have done better, but the truth is, it's none of that, and the decision was just made at a higher level. As part of the deal, Apple agreed to sell directly on Amazon, which certainly was a feather in Amazon's hat and made them tons of money. And I'm sure it didn't bother Apple a whole lot that millions of used products got wiped off half the internet. I think it was just a simple calculation, and so they made a short sighted decision and pulled the trigger. People say Amazon has the right to choose its sellers. It's their company, they can do what they want, right? The problem with that is that Amazon is literally half the marketplace for all things sold online. So when a company this big makes what would normally be a decision within its rights, small players get crushed because they can't get access to the place where things are sold. It becomes an antitrust scenario, and that's a significant difference that should change the lens through which the situation is viewed. This is not just any company anymore. The decisions it makes affect the property rights of others, the right to sell in the place where things are sold. Property rights in the United States are based on a legal concept called the first sale doctrine. This tells us we have the right to resell something we own. We can repair, modify, sell, or smash it to pieces. An Apple laptop in our inventory is our property and our product, not Apple's product. But when a manufacturer makes a deal to block our ability to sell our property on half the online marketplace, this constitutes a circumvention of the first sale doctrine, our ability to do what we want with our stuff. Allowing marketplaces and manufacturers to make deals is a very slippery slope. After all, why wouldn't every marketplace want a partnership with Apple or all manufacturers? Many sellers were also banned from selling Apple on the Walmart marketplace. So we don't know, did Apple and Walmart have a similar agreement? Amazon announced what appeared to be a similar deal with Nintendo, but it backtracked and said the announcement was an error. Once the avalanche of deals starts, marketplaces may need to trade up to hotels just to stay competitive. eBay is historically pro-seller, but it's dwarfed by Amazon, only about 10% of the market. So what will it do to compete? eBay announced a refurbisher program and requires all sellers to sign NDAs, so we know nothing about that program and how it's going. Who knows what kind of nonsense is behind the veil of their NDA? eBay refurbished sellers are legally prohibited from telling us, so we certainly can't count on them. If I had been under an NDA while selling on Amazon, it's possible the whole Apple-Amazon agreement would never have been publicized. Check out my video on the eBay NDA situation if you're interested. People say, well, hey, if you don't like it, start your own website, sell on your own. But reality is, it's just not easy to create all the infrastructure from scratch, and on top of that, to actually get traction on the internet. Most people just need a marketplace. And so when all the marketplaces trade up to hotels, small sellers are practically pushed into the black market. Soon we might be listing our inventory on Craigslist and meeting up with customers in Walmart parking lots. I agree that the biggest companies have rights, of course they do, but what about the rights of the majority? This also affects consumer choice. Amazon only created renewed listings for newer, more expensive laptops, and listings for affordable ones were deactivated. A perfectly good $129 MacBook that ran the current OS and was a great deal for consumers and was available by the millions ceased to exist on half the internet overnight. Suddenly, the cheapest MacBook was around $349, not $129. That means that millions of perfectly good cheap devices with no place to go end up scrapped. It gets worse. To this day, most renewed listings do not state the year a device was manufactured, but they do include a date first available field, which is the date the Amazon listing was created. This leads consumers to believe, for example, that a 2012 MacBook Pro was manufactured in 2018. That's probably why this laptop now sells for 2 to 3 times more on Amazon than eBay. Amazon is half the online marketplace, so are consumers even checking anywhere else? Do they know any better? 5 years ago, when I did the original version of this video, I asked the question of what's next. I hoped that new marketplaces might spring up, that the other 50% of the internet might come to life. Did that happen? No, not really. A few marketplaces got some traction during COVID, but mostly Amazon just grew. And what's worse, brand gating, the practice of requiring manufacturer approval to sell an item, has completely consumed Amazon. And as a seller, you can barely sell anything without permission, without the manufacturer illegally violating your property rights. eBay exists in about the same proportion as before, and like I said, the NDA situation is in effect there. NDAs for marketplaces and manufacturers have actually become an epidemic recently. It's a popular new way to keep your powerless business partners quiet. What, you haven't heard about that? Well, yeah, you haven't heard because it's working. It's an epidemic of silence. So yeah, anyway, so much for any kind of market correction helping us. But then again, when you have monopolies, the market can't correct. The market is broken. The system isn't working as it should. That's why we have federal agencies to bust up monopolies, right? To step in when consumers are powerless because the game is rigged. The FTC exists for just that reason, to be the referee in the game of capitalism and correct monopoly situations on behalf of the public. But despite their promises, nothing has happened. Which is sad. There was so much momentum around antitrust. There was so much low-hanging fruit, yet nothing. The companies in question have only grown. I asked Jason Kebler, the reporter, to file a federal FOIA request to get the information that was acquired in the DOJ probe. I mean, hey, if the FTC isn't going to do anything with the information, then I certainly can read through it and make some noise, and that's better than nothing, right? But so far, the request has gone unanswered. So at the end of the day, there has been zero penalty in the US for either Apple or Amazon. I mean, France fined Amazon $100 million for the agreement, which was completely ineffective, but at least they did something. After a year of talking big and beating its chest, the USA did nothing, and the FTC is spending its time on relatively insignificant issues and just putting out lots and lots of marketing. People cringe at the thought of breaking up companies, but there's a history of mega corporations being broken into component parts. People don't understand. It's not the death of a company, but in fact the revitalization of a company. When a company is broken into separate entities, they find that once again they have to innovate and work hard in order to compete and survive against other players. Whereas, as a monopoly, there was no risk of losing their top spot, and they didn't even have to provide good service. If Amazon was broken up into a web services company, a marketplace for used sellers, and also a storefront for manufacturers, each of those would have to focus on providing value instead of screwing the public and blocking competition. 5 years ago, I talked about trying to solve the problem by taking legal action, but unfortunately the ability to sue is riddled with problems. Bulletproof terms of service agreements, forced arbitration agreements, ineligibility for class action lawsuits, and now NDAs. One lawyer told me that manufacturers and marketplaces have rigged their systems to be unsolvable Rubik's cubes, and they use this list of tools to deflect any and all lawsuits. Private lawsuits could be the answer, but unless you have a billionaire handy, good luck, because it costs millions just to start the process. Certainly, the situation is overwhelming, and it's easier to do nothing. I get it. We are in new territory. In this crazy world of technology, what constitutes precedence? What constitutes antitrust? Where is the line exactly? What is the appropriate penalty? Should we treat the internet like a utility? How big is too big? The internet factor muddles it all up, and we barely understand it, let alone know what to do. But one thing we know Amazon is half the internet marketplace. The vast majority of Americans have a Prime membership. Amazon Web Services is the world's biggest cloud computing provider. Our government predominantly uses AWS. And Apple has a similar portfolio of near monopolies across entertainment, apps, phones, and computers. When Apple releases new products, it's legitimately national news, and they automatically get more free publicity than billions of dollars could buy. What new startup company could possibly compete with that? I get it. I get that it's really hard. And when taking action, you have to be cautious. A surgeon should know where to start cutting, right? But when you know there's cancer, you have to take action because if you don't do something, the patient will certainly die. So here's the most important thing to realize. Waiting itself is a form of recklessness because the severity of the problem increases with time. If we don't take antitrust seriously and break up big tech, if the FTC doesn't wake up and do its job, if we don't restore competition and the functionality of our free market system now, when will we? When Amazon and Apple are 5 times bigger? When manufacturer approval is required to sell anything? When the first sale doctrine is truly and completely dead? When there are no small businesses left to enrich our communities and act as vehicles for independence? When all used products are scrapped because corporations decide they shouldn't see the light of day? When the American dream is just a laughable joke? When Amazon's ownership of the online marketplace is 70%, 80%, 90%? Well, I know what the plan is. Clearly, the plan is to sit on our hands and hope the problem fixes itself. But hey, I'll check in another 5. That is, if YouTube still allows a small whiny channel like mine to even exist. Thanks for watching.